And also, in terms of all these destructions, all these wars in the Middle East, I think it's definitely we need to raise the awareness about what happened there because it's not really being covered by the Western media, or they were covered, but I mean, very selective, not as much as we're seeing the war in Europe now. Can you give us some rough idea or what you saw over there, what happened there, how much damage that all these wars backed by the US, by NATO, what kind of damage brought to the people in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, just to start with a personal experience, me, my mother, my sister, we haven't been able to go back to Syria since the war began, in 2011. So even of course, there are people who suffered much more, which I'll get to in a moment. But even people who are outside of Syria have been impacted by that. Can't see family, can't even go to funerals. And this is really, really painful. I haven't seen my cousins or my family there for 10 years. And my cousins, who some of them who left as refugees, some who are still in Syria. I was talking to them the other day, and I really want people to understand this because people think that sanctions are some kind of peaceful alternative to war. My cousins told me they would rather live under the bombs again than to have sanctions. That's how bad it is. Because in Damascus now it's quite peaceful, but for a long time it wasn't. You had shelling, like I was just talking about earlier. Damascus was really not safe for a long time. And my cousins were telling me they would rather live under that again than to be under the sanctions now. You cannot get fuel,
Why?
you cannot get bread. Because everyone is starving. It's funny because they always say in socialist countries you have bread lines, like everyone is so poor and starving. You don't have bread lines in Syria. I never saw a single bread line. That's completely untrue. Actually, Syria was self-sufficient and a net exporter of wheat. So there are no bread lines. There are bread lines now. Why? Because of Western sanctions, and that must be seen as a part of the war. We shouldn't think that the war is just bombs. No. There is a siege warfare. It's like in the Middle Ages, they would come and they would surround a city and cut off the food, and people in the city would die of starvation, malnutrition, and disease. This is the modern equivalent of siege warfare. This is what sanctions do. And the suffering in Syria has not stopped. It's continuing because Donald Trump in 2020, in June 2020, he put the Caesar Act sanctions on Syria. Joe Biden, you think he lifted those? Of course not. Just the oil, for example, Syria is not a big exporter of oil compared to Saudi Arabia or Iran and so on, or Russia. But for the Syrian economy, oil is important. It used to be 25% of the government revenue. And that's cut off. That entire quarter of government revenue is gone. Why? Because you have the United States with the SDF, the Kurdish-led SDF that are occupying the oil fields and stealing the oil. Even if you want to believe them, where they say they're protecting the oil, I don't care what you call it. You're cutting off revenue from the government, and you are cutting services and social welfare and all kinds of infrastructure from the Syrian people. That you're robbing them. And this is just one aspect of the war. I'm just talking about the sanctions here, right? Like, never mind the last 10 years, all the bloodshed. They destroyed Aleppo. They leveled this. Aleppo is one of the oldest cities in the world. They destroyed the Umayyad Mosque, the bazaar in Aleppo, so many cultural sites, UNESCO World Heritage sites. And then, of course, the rest of Syria completely devastated. They have no shame. They really have no shame. Again, just to talk about this double standard, which bothers me a lot. Every other week, Israel is bombing Syria. No one cares. They don't care about Syria's sovereignty. They don't care about Syria's territorial integrity. You have Turkey occupying Syria in the north, the United States to the northeast, Israel in the south. They've cut Syria into 4 parts, and then they have the nerve to come in and say that they care about Ukraine's sovereignty. Great, care about Ukraine's sovereignty, but why don't you care when you're violating Syria's sovereignty, or Yemen, for example, the destruction that they've caused in Yemen? Because it's not just about the country's territorial integrity, it's the people. They are also strangling Yemen now with sanctions and with this oil embargo. The Saudis and the Aden government, they claim that there's no embargo. There is an embargo because they are making money off of the oil. When people in Yemen are paying for fuel at the pump, 50% of the price is added cost that did not need to be there. It's from the oil passing through all these checkpoints. This group, this militia adds 10%. Al Qaeda adds another 10%, and then of course this money is going to the government in Aden, the Saudi-backed government. So Yemenis are paying to be killed. They're paying for their own deaths. And who's making this money? Of course, it's not just the Saudi-backed government. It's the United States, the UK, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, who are selling those weapons. So even when they say we are not involved in this conflict, they're very much involved. And even Germany, which now is sending weapons to Ukraine, they claim that they used to be neutral. So, but that's not true, because you always had German weapons winding up in Yemen. So they are making money from this. And I think it's really disgusting. These are just two countries, Syria, Yemen. We can look at Libya. Libya used to be one of the most prosperous countries in Africa. I mean, I don't care what they want to say about Gaddafi. You can find any leader in the world and make criticisms, but we cannot deny that Gaddafi, he raised the literacy rate in Libya. He undertook one of the largest irrigation projects in the world, the Great Man-Made River, as it was called. Libya is 90% desert, and he brought water for people, not just drinking water, but also for irrigation. I mean, it's an incredible engineering project and social project, right? And of course, what happens to that? NATO bombed it. A war crime. They bombed the public infrastructure of the Great Man-Made River, and they stopped it before it could be fully completed. And then, of course, the people in Libya, they promised them democracy. They promised them all these changes. Where is it? We're in 2022. That's 10 years ago. They've been telling us that Gaddafi has to be taken out, a no-fly zone, and then people in Libya will prosper. Just like they said in Iraq, they're going to bring democracy. Where is it? These countries are still under occupation. They're still destroyed. The people there have been turned into refugees. I mean, enormous migrant crises, and the living standard has gone down, not up. And democracy, I mean, forget about that. That's not even in the equation.